Still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you.
Mma stared at Angela and the gun pointed point blank at her face in a dreadful horror. She was motionless, speechless, and in shock. I have been in love with him since I was 8, and for 28 years. 28 years? I waited for him, and then suddenly he returned my test. Agreed to dinner, agreed to escort me to an event, and finally, we were gradually building a relationship. And then you snatched it all away? Mma slowly stood up. She looked around for some kind of escape. The door was ajar, but she had to go through Angela to get to it. That would be a dangerous move. Angela wasn't thinking rationally. Her eyes were wild. Her nose flared. It was obvious she was having a mental breakdown. Keep her talking. If she's talking, she won't shoot. Mma thought fearfully. Angela, you need to calm down. You gain nothing by killing me. No, you are wrong. I will have all I lost restored back to me. You would lose more than Uche. You would lose everything. You will be out of the picture, and I'll be there to console him. From prison or from the grave if you get the death penalty. Let's say you manage to avoid all that. Do you think Uche and the entire Okoha clan would welcome a murderer? It will go to show him how much I love him and what I am willing to do for that love. It will only show him how crazy you are. With me out of the picture and you rotting away in prison, you would hear of his wedding to another girl. And this time around, you wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Not from prison anyway. You think I am just going to let go 28 years of my life? You had more than 28 years. Just last week you slept with him. Shouldn't that have scored you some points if I was truly the problem? But Angela was laughing so hard and crazily that Mma was afraid she might accidentally shoot. And you are going to marry him? I am convinced now that killing you is saving Uche from a heartless gold digger like you. You believe he slept with his ex a week to your wedding? And yet here you are. Angela laughed again. Mma stood motionless as another kind of fear began to creep into her body. She was suddenly feeling cold. Here you are all dressed up to marry a man you believe is a cheater. Since you are going to die anyway, I didn't sleep with him. But whose words are you going to believe? Crazy old me or the man you profess to love? Mma stared at her with disbelief and she began to replay the scene in her head. She could see the surprised look on Uche's face that fateful morning. It then dawned on her that the surprised look on his face wasn't at her sudden appearance, but for the sight of naked Angela on his bed. All this while, he was telling the truth. Suddenly, the living room began to spin. There is only one reason you want to marry Uche. A man you don't trust or love, and that is money, fame, power his surname brings. Angela took an aim with her gun. Where was Uche? Mma thought frantically. She couldn't just die without letting him know how sorry she was for doubting him. She looked around for something to defend herself. Where was the man who said he had eyes on all his interests? Or was she not one of them? Where were the bodyguards when they were needed? Outside her house, Uche arrived. He nodded at the man who he had left behind last night to watch her because he had been afraid of Mike coming back. He got to the door and found it ajar, then he stopped. Mma was not careless. She paid attention to details. She would never leave her door open like this. He quietly looked into the house and a mighty dread fell upon him. He wanted to burst into the room, but he knew that Angela might shoot if she was suddenly spooked. The stupid bodyguard was getting fired, and if Mma got hurt, he was going to do more than fire him. Mma, at loss on what to do, suddenly looked up and met Uche's eyes. He nodded at her and she could feel relief flood into her body. But the relief didn't last for long, as it dawned on her that Uche was in as much danger as she was. At this point, Angela could shoot without thinking if she sees any sudden movements, and that could be Uche. Mma began to speak again to keep Angela focused on her and on nothing else. You are wrong. How can I marry for money when I have mine? For power and fame? Have you forgotten who my mother is? Right now you don't have a dime. Does Uche know this is the reason you want to marry him? Mma's eyes widened in shock. What did you just say? I know all about your money troubles, girlfriend. And that is how I proved to Uche that you would do anything for money. She laughed crazily as Mma wondered how that made sense to her, while also wondering what Angela had got to do with her loss of money. But she couldn't deal with that then, or she would get overly emotional. Uche and one of his bodyguards were almost on them, and she couldn't fail at her one job, which is keeping Angela distracted. So die, Mma, with your fake love. She raised the gun, but Uche expertly grabbed her and skillfully disarmed her and disassembled the gun expertly. Then he drew Mma into his arms, hugging her tightly as if his breath depended on it, and she held on to him for dear life. Are you alright? She nodded. Tears began to fill her eyes. Are you sure? Yes, I am, she reassured him. We are postponing this wedding. I can't put you through this after. Uche, I want to get married to you today, she pleaded. Uche stared at her confused. Are you sure? Yes, she tried smiling. Let's go then. But they stopped as Angela, who was being held by the bodyguard, suddenly let out a loud screech. No, Uche! She doesn't love you. She doesn't trust you. She's doing this because she's broke and has no one to turn to. She's marrying you for your money, please. She began to struggle to get away from the bodyguard. I love you. Can't you see what I'm willing to do for our love? I was going to get rid of that heartless god digger for you. Angela, the police should be on their way by now, but prison won't cure what is ailing you. I am handing you over to your father because he can't afford a scandal now while trying to save your family fortune. And he had assured me that you are headed straight to the psych ward, or your family would not have a dime to call their own, and that would make sure you rot in prison. He led Mma out and on to an uncertain future that awaited them. The wedding ceremony was as quiet as she had imagined, even though the whole Okoha clan were present except for Eva. Mma couldn't believe it as people called her Mrs. Okoha. The name felt so strange to her, yet she adored it. This was the very name she had dreamed of bearing ever since she had met Uche. She stared at him as he held her, guiding her out of the registry where Phyllis and Tessie had stood as witnesses. She knew they needed to talk. She needed to apologize for not believing him, but the right time had not presented itself. Her husband, she thought odd. She woke up this morning thinking this was going to be the saddest day of her life, but it was turning magical. It might have started as a business arrangement, but she was happy that it would be the night of her dreams. She would do all in her power to make it so. She blinked as they came out in the open. She was greatly astonished by the reporters fluttering around them and asking them questions. She felt Uche's hands tighten around her as he ignored their questions and shielded her from them onto the waiting sports car. Seeing the car again, she wondered if he had borrowed it from Batman. Someone should really cure him of this car madness. A quick look around showed she was not the only one gaping at the car with amazement. But Uche walked as if it was an everyday experience for him. Are you okay? He was about to open the door for her. Just as she was about to answer, an elderly man hurried to them and closed the door. Mma stared at the man, afraid for him. Sorry, Uche, but here is your ride, your mother's orders. She saw him ball his fingers into a fist, and they both watched as the white stretch limousine lazily cruised to a stop in front of them. The chauffeur came down, and the elderly man quickly opened the door for them and closed it after them. Then he got into the driver's seat, leaving the Lamborghini for the new driver to manage. Tight-lipped, Uche did as they said. The ride through town was a quiet one, too quiet. She could feel he was upset by the change of plans. Wearily, she wondered what his mother was trying to do. She had thought this would be the perfect time to talk, but not in his current mood. A better opportunity would come before the day would be over. You are going the wrong way, Jacob, he said in clipped tones. Mma noticed then that they were not heading towards Uche's house. I am acting on instructions. On whose instructions? Mma could feel the ice cracking. She took his hands and squeezed, trying to calm him down. Turn this car around now. I don't work for you. I take orders from your mother alone. This is not my mother's wedding, and I have a small reception planned and guests waiting. Turn the car around now before I lose my temper. Mma watched the man laugh heartily. I assure you there has been a change in plans. Mma was confused. The man wasn't afraid at all. There was more to the relationship between Uche and this man. He didn't jump at the sound of his voice like the others did. Uche knew he was not going to get Jacob to turn the car around. If there was anybody who didn't jump at his orders, it was Jacob, and he didn't demand it. Not when the man had been with his family longer than he could remember. He was there in his boyhood, teaching him all the tricks. It was Jacob who taught him how to drive. It was very clever of his mother to ask him to do her dirty job. She knew very well that only Jacob could get away with this. Sorry, babe, he turned to Mma. My mother has decided to do things her own way. Mma smiled, understanding how Rose must have felt. She was her only son, and there was no way she was going to allow her only son have a mushroom wedding just in the name of peace. As the huge car glided to a stop and they came down, Uche still needed to make way so that they could walk into the hall without bumping into the reporters. In the hall, there were already more than 30 guests drinking wine and talking in small groups. Uche stopped, looking at them with irritation. I am going to have her head for this. Mma stood dumbfounded. How was this possible? Except for family and close friends, no one knew of their wedding plans. Where did they all come from? She wondered silently. A smiling Rose came towards them. Why are you two standing around like statues? It is your wedding day, for crying out loud. If I had known about this rush decision of yours on time, I wouldn't have let you wear this today, she told Mma, trying to adjust her simple wedding gown. It was really very sudden. She smiled at Rose and looked at her wedding attire. It was a last-minute creation, and she had thought it was going to be a quiet wedding. It was the best she could do at such a short notice, with all the other things she had to do. She looked up as Uche addressed his mother. What is the meaning of this? What are you talking about? Rose asked, acting ignorant. This whole crowd you invited here. What is this? Anger? Even on your wedding day? I can't believe this. Angry at your mother on your wedding day of all days? Mma wanted to laugh at the astonished look on Uche's face. I have a right to feel this way. It is your wedding day, and you are standing around like a guest, frowning at everybody who looked your way. You have a beautiful bride by your side, but you are not smiling at her or kissing her. Rather, you are angry at your mother for trying to help. Whose fault is it anyway? If you had done things as originally planned, I wouldn't have butted in. Mma couldn't help her smile. Very clever of Rose. She managed to heap the whole blame on Uche. She was amazed and glad that things turned out the way they did. A wedding was a once-in-a-lifetime thing and should be celebrated to the fullest. She liked the whole idea. Even though their marriage might not last if Uche didn't accept her apology, then it would be over as soon as he was done salvaging his lost pride. Yet, she was grateful to Rose for making this day one to remember. The day she got married to the man she loved. That was exactly how she was going to remember it. Lost, are you? Uche asked, and she looked at him. Just tired, she replied. Would you like to sit for a while? If you don't mind, she smiled at him. Uche led her to a waiting room. Mma wondered what was going on. They should be taking pictures. Pictures were supposed to be the first thing to be done. Uche, the photographers have been waiting for ages. One of Uche's aunts rushed in. What photographers? He snapped at her. Well, honey, something called a wedding album. Uche stood up reluctantly and they walked outside to take pictures. There were more reporters than there were photographers. She smiled when Phyllis and Tessie stood with them to take a picture. Again, she realized how satisfied she was with the decision she made when she saw their happy faces. The group went back to the hall and the party began then. The reception made up for the glamour that was lacking in the wedding ceremony. She began to enjoy herself despite her inner turmoil. Everyone who was prominent in the country attended the wedding, and this Mma didn't expect. not with a short notice. When it was time to dance, she sighed and relaxed in her husband's arms as they danced to the instrumental of a love song by a live band. They painted a picture of what people read in fairy tale stories. Soon the band changed into something faster and other people joined. Mma begged to sit down after a while, and she also yearned some time alone to think. Yes, she was a married woman, but she knew that that was hardly the end of the story. She turned to Uche with a huge smile. I would love to go to the ladies. She saw him looking at her as if trying to sniff out the real reason why she wanted to leave, but she was unwavering in her smile. That would be the second floor. I keep it especially for my guests. She turned to look at him with surprise. My family owns this place. I will be back shortly. He signaled one of the bodyguards to follow her. From the door of the well-furnished room, all she could see was that the interior decorator must be very practical-minded. It was a suite meant to house business associates visiting from far places, and that was what he or she did. She wrapped her hands around herself, thinking how far she had come since the first day she met Uche Okoha. She had fallen hopelessly in love with him, lost that love and trust, nearly lost her life and business, but he came to her rescue both times. Then she married him. She laughed sadly. Forced to marry him was more like it. She blamed him for everything. So discovering that she had no one but herself to blame was overwhelming. She didn't believe him. Why didn't she believe him? He had never given her a reason to doubt him before, and then she became angry at him too. He didn't fight for her. He only followed her home in the heat of the moment and never came back. If she hadn't lost all her money, they probably wouldn't be celebrating their wedding. From the corner of her eyes, she saw Helen below, sitting all by herself. Then she also saw Chuck standing almost in front of her. And if not that he was surrounded by other girls, it would have been easy for him to notice the quiet beauty sitting in front of him. Mma smiled. She promised Helen she was going to get her an introduction, and that she would do. She turned swiftly from the window to do just that, smiling and devising a means to achieve what she was going to do. But she stopped and the smile left her face. Standing at the door and quietly observing her was Amber. I am sorry, Amber began. I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't. Mma began to walk past her. Mma. Amber called but trailed off. It was obvious that the woman didn't know what to say to her, and Mma vowed she was not going to help her. If the woman didn't know what to say to her daughter, then it was nobody's fault but hers. If you will please excuse me, I have to rejoin the ceremony. Mma nearly got to the door before her mother's next word stopped her. I don't deserve to be forgiven or to be called anyone's mother, so I am not going to insult you by asking you for either. But I just want to ask that you hear my own side of the story. Mma could feel her temper rising at the woman's arrogance. Like you said, I do not owe you anything, and I already know your side of the story. You left your 8-month-old baby to build your dreams. What reason could justify that particular action? When you made your choice, Amber, I wasn't given a choice or consideration. So tell me, why should I accord you the same? You are right. I was selfish. My marriage wasn't working out. I married too young and regretted almost immediately. Please, I can't do this right now. I looked out for you. I never forgot that I had a child. I have always dreaded this day, the day I will have to explain myself to you. One thing is clear. This is not the day. Today is my wedding day. Mma walked out and continued walking. There was no way she was going to make it easy for her. The one who secretly watched let out a sorrowful screech. It was unbelievable. How did this happen? Following her upstairs, thinking to harm her, make her disappear, did not work. But not to worry. The bride would definitely come home, and the bodyguards will not be with her 24/7 in the house.
In the still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you. You're the one I can't let go. In your arms I find my home, love.